On the 4th of February 1929 at 6 p.m, two next-door neighbours, Kate Jackson and Olive Dimmock, left their bungalows in Plunch Lane, Limesdale near the Mumbles Headland, to go to the local Tivoli cinema. By the end of the day, one would be attacked that night and die 6 days later. We look not just at the terrible event, but the rather extraordinary background of the victim. This is the perplexing murder of Kate Jackson. At just before 10 p.m, the two friends parted company and returned to their respective homes. Olive Dimmock was taking off her hat and coat when she heard three screams. As the bungalows were within earshot of waves crashing on the beach at Limesdale Bay, they must have been quite loud. At first she thought it was a domestic argument of some warring couple in another nearby house, but then realised it was her friend Kate Jackson. It was a quiet day in Fleet Street, and the press had little to fill the column inches, as all the papers could report on was that the King, who had been ill, was well enough to travel down to Bognor to enjoy the sea air. Hence the interest in her murder. They soon found out that Kate was actually the mysterious Madam X, who was a witness in an embezzlement case 2 years earlier. In the finest traditions of journalism, they descended on the area. Kate Jackson had certainly led a colourful life. She liked to be called Molly, and was currently pretending to be the secretive romance writer Ethel M. Dell, noted for her racy romantic novels largely set in India. Whilst the novels were successful, they earned the ire of George Orwell and P.G. Wodehouse. This must have come as a shock to the real Ethel M. Dell, who certainly did not live in a bungalow near the Mumbles Headland, just west of Swansea. So who was this mysterious woman who lived in fear of being uncovered, and at the time of her murder was being sent poisoned pen letters? As the real Ethel M. Dell was very secretive and was rarely photographed, and never gave interviews, it was easy to maintain this fiction. She had told her husband that she had been born in India as the youngest daughter of the Duke of Abercorn, but her actual birth certificate told a different story. Rather than a hill station in Simla, she was born in Lancashire in 1885 to a farm labourer, John Atkinson, and his wife Agnes. Sometime in her teens she went to London in 1904 to tread the boards as an actress. In those days, an actress was not someone who attended RADA, but viewed as little more than a loose woman. Instead, she became the common-law wife of a portrait painter called Leopold Legris. Later he would describe her as uneducated but clever and a good talker. This arrangement lasted until the beginning of the First World War. But her big break came in Charing Cross Road, where she pretended to faint on seeing a car accident in 1914. A Mr. Harrison, who was General Secretary of the National Association of Coopers, took pity on her, as she claimed she had not eaten for 3 days, and invited her to lunch. A very bad move. From a simple lunch the two started an affair. When she announced that she was pregnant, Harrison paid £40 for an abortion. She kept demanding further payment, initially for complications resulting from the operation, and each Wednesday she received £30. Eventually, Harrison was found guilty of embezzling union funds and sentenced to 5 years in jail. He claimed at the trial that of the £19,000, a total of £8,000 was due to a woman who was described as Molly Legris. The court referred to her as Madam X. The police made a request to the judge not to reveal her identity, in the hope that she would return the funds. She sold her farmhouse in Surrey as restitution, and moved to a bungalow on the Mumbles to get away from the notoriety. Whilst her money-making scam did not make her a fortune, it did enable her to live far beyond her normal station in life. Around 1919, she married a war veteran called Tom Jackson. As she was claiming to be the youngest daughter of a duke, Tom decided to change his name to Captain Harry Gordon Ingram, and the couple adopted a daughter called Betty, who claimed was the illegitimate daughter of some lord. Later, they married under their real names, and it is possible that Tom came across Kate's real birth certificate. Kate claims she had bought it from a girl who was emigrating to Australia. All seems a bit improbable. Life would have continued in Surrey if Harrison had not been caught with his fingers in the proverbial till. The couple were forced to leave their home in the south of England and move to Wales, buying a bungalow called Kenilworth in Limesdale, just outside Mumbles, 15 miles west of Swansea. Tom worked as a fishmonger, whilst Kate still received payments that never have been completely explained. Despite losing the payments from Harrison, who was languishing in some prison, she still received additional money every Wednesday. As the average working wage was just £4 per week, her lifestyle in Kenilworth was impressive for the wife of a fishmonger. Her clothes bill was sky high, and she regularly gave large tips, yet she never had a telephone. She claimed to neighbours that she was a romantic novelist as well as a journalist, which went some way to explaining some of the income she had been receiving. The source of this largesse has never been explained, though it has been suggested that it was either as a sex worker or blackmail, or both. Kate was petrified that her true identity would be discovered. She had been playing a very dangerous game as money had been siphoned off to her account, rather than supporting union members who had to endure long hours on low wages. When the police searched the bungalow, they discovered this curious letter.
Lest you forget, this is to tell you we are watching you, and we will get you, you husband stealer. You a robber of workers' money that would have fed starving children, you and that man of yours. I suppose he is somebody's husband too. When we get you, we will tar and feather you, and for every quid you have taken from us, we will get another lump of tar and one more feather. We will show people you're as black outside as you are inside. We don't mind doing prison time for you, Piccadilly Lily. We will get you yet.
As you can imagine, it is not the sort of thing you would want to receive in the post. It is a curious letter, as it focuses more on her love life, rather than being party to fraud by Harrison. No wonder she was petrified of being identified as the mysterious Madam X. Blackmail is still taken very seriously, and Kate certainly had form. On the night of the assault, when Olive Dimmock arrived back at the bungalow, she came across Kate lying on the ground, with her husband bending over her. Her head was bleeding profusely. She was carried into the kitchen to be tended to. 2 more people arrived, one being Sidney Dimmock, husband of Olive, and the other a Rose Gammon. For a man who had come across an assault in which his wife was barely conscious, with an obvious head wound, Tom Jackson was very complacent. Mrs. Gammon suggested he call a doctor, but he refused, claiming that he would only call one if a condition deteriorated. In those days, calling out a doctor in the middle of the night was going to be expensive, as a doctor's attendance was not free. Kate's condition worsened, and Tom went round to Mrs. Janet Phillips' bungalow to call out a Dr. Taylor from Mumbles. The doctor noted the seriousness of Kate's condition, as evidenced by her serious head wounds. He said that Tom should order a taxi and inform both the hospital and the police. Instead, Tom just ordered a taxi. The doctor informed him that the hospital would not accept a patient unless they were given prior warning. Tom, the wounded Kate, and Olive got into the taxi, whilst the doctor would drive behind in his own car. Before they set off, through the open window of the taxi the doctor made inquiries as to Kate's condition. Tom replied she was sleeping peacefully and muttered a curious comment. "I have been married to her for 10 years, and I still don't know who she is." Quite a curious thing to say. He did not hang around to speak to the hospital staff, but returned in the taxi back to Limesdale. At around 3 a.m, the hospital staff informed the police, who started to investigate the assault. The police sent a constable to guard Kate, as they hoped she would give details of her assailant and the reason behind it. Despite becoming lucid after a few hours, she did not reveal any relevant details and only mumbled the word "gorse." On the 10th of February, she died, aged 43, and it was noted that it resulted from a weak heart, aided by the trauma of the attack. An assault had now turned into a murder inquiry. The police had found a pool of blood at the back of the house and some broken glass. At 5 a.m, Tom opened the front door of the bungalow to the police, who were becoming suspicious. He told them that he was in bed and heard a scream followed by a thud at 10:45 p.m. He had then quickly gone out of the house and found his wounded wife at the back. It was then that Olive Dimmock turned up at the scene. The police, on searching the house, found a tire iron hidden under a cushion in the living room. Tom's replied that he thought the discovery was a pleasant surprise, as he could add it to his toolbox. X-rays had shown that Kate had a fractured skull, and there were a total of 9 wounds. The only words that she uttered was "gorse." This has been interpreted as a reference to her previous lover, Legrees, and this could also explain the reference to "husband stealer" in the poison pen letter. When interviewed by a detective, Olive Dimmock noted that Kate had a fear of strange cars, and that one was opposite the bungalow on the night of the assault. Despite his cooperation, Tom was arrested 2 weeks later, and in July of that year he was charged with murder. If found guilty by the jury, the judge had no alternative but to sentence him to be hanged. Only a Home Secretary acting on the Crown's prerogative could commute it to a life sentence. The police, having no other possible suspects, interviewed 40 people from the surrounding area, but they believed that they had got their man. The prosecution's position was that Tom was tired of his wife, annoyed that they were getting less money, and argued with her and attacked her as she was removing her coat. Tom's rather complacent attitude after the assault was seen as indicative of guilt, as he was reluctant to call the hospital or the police and could give no credible reason why the tire iron was hidden under a cushion. He only had a 16-year-old girl as a defence witness, as she had claimed to have seen a stranger in the neighbourhood on the night in question. Her evidence was contradicted by 3 prosecution witnesses, who were in the same spot when this sighting was supposed to have happened. But as any criminal lawyer will tell you, jury trials have a tendency not to believe the prosecution's position, and so it was to prove here. Tom was able to convince the jury that the marriage was a happy one, and the only time of marital discord was an occasion when she threw a flower pot at him and threatened him with a knife for becoming too friendly with Olive Dimmock. On the question of the tire iron, an expert witness explained that it may not have caused the actual death of the victim. This rather destroyed the prosecution's case that the hidden implement caused her death. More importantly, the prosecution did not reveal the poisoned pen letters, but they were raised in court. Someone knew of her identity and her background. This could not be denied, yet the judge, who was openly hostile to Tom in his summing up, stated that there is no evidence of any secret enemy, but merely supposition or possibility. Tom by this stage was becoming something of a folk hero, as he answered all questions in a charming and witty manner, to the annoyance of the prosecution and the judge. He kept reminding the court that he was a grieving single father who had to look after his daughter Betty. Despite the judge's summing up, the jury took less than half an hour to find him not guilty. The public gallery went wild with excitement as to the verdict. The police never tried to find another suspect. It has been suggested that Gorse was really Legris. He certainly existed, as he lived from 1876 until his death in Kensington in 1971. Kate was just his common-law wife up to 1914, and he did get married in 1921. A portrait painter does not sound like the type of man seeking to preserve his reputation. It has been suggested that the union were unhappy with the terms of the restitution to get their money back. This is unlikely, as the sale of the farmhouse in Surrey would have covered the amount due. It was not Harrison, as he was languishing in some prison. Hiring an assassin is possible, but he was ruined financially by this time. The poisoned pen letter may give a clue with the term of Piccadilly Lily. Was she hanging around with the wrong type of people in Soho? A few years later, Tom married Olive Dimmock.